The faint hum of treadmills filled the air at Elite Fitness Gym, mixed with the metallic clink of weights and the occasional burst of laughter from the far corner. Thursday nights were usually quiet, but tonight, the entire gym buzzed with tension. In the middle of the pristine black mat stood Blake Morrison, the city's most famous personal trainer, adjusting his tight charcoal tank top that showcased the muscles he had spent years building with the help of designer supplements and discreetly sourced steroids. His 5 wealthy clients, wives of some of the most influential businessmen in town, lingered nearby, their laughter soft and nervous, more out of social pressure than amusement. "Hey, you the cleaning? How about showing everyone how not to work out?" Blake's booming voice cut across the room like a blade. His eyes locked on Antonio Silva, the janitor quietly wiping down a mirror along the back wall. Antonio paused mid-swipe, his rag hovering over the glass. He was 43, lean but solid, his plain navy work shirt clinging slightly to shoulders broader than expected for a man in his position. His face was calm, unreadable, like still water hiding a storm beneath. For 3 months, he'd worked at the gym during late hours when most members had already left, scrubbing, polishing, and mopping floors that reeked of sweat and ego. He preferred it that way, and no attention, no interactions, no chance of old memories clawing their way back. But tonight, Blake's VIP session had run longer than usual, forcing Antonio into the same space as people who barely acknowledged his existence. He turned, his voice quiet but steady. "Sorry, I don't want to get in the way of your training," he said, continuing to scrub the mirror. "Just finishing up so you can have the space." Blake laughed, a loud, theatrical sound meant for an audience. "Guys, look at this." The man's scared to even step on the mat. His wealthy clients chuckled awkwardly, but a few looked uncomfortable, their glances darting between Blake and Antonio. What Blake didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Antonio Silva had spent the last 15 years trying to bury who he used to be. 15 years since the night he left the ring. 15 years since the accident that had changed everything. Antonio inhaled deeply, letting the smell of cleaning chemicals and rubber mats ground him in the present. He told himself to ignore it. He told himself to stay small. But Blake wasn't finished. He strutted closer, shoulders rolled back, wearing the arrogant grin he used to intimidate beginners. "Come on, man," he teased. "Just a little demonstration. I bet you don't even know how to do a push-up properly. Show my students what happens when you skip leg day for 40 years and live on burgers and fries." Antonio's hands tightened slightly around the rag, the memory of old instincts stirring somewhere deep inside. He lifted his head slowly, meeting Blake's gaze for the first time. Something unspoken passed between them, a flicker that made Blake hesitate almost imperceptibly before regaining his composure. "Just an educational demonstration," Blake said, his tone slightly forced now. "Nothing too serious. Show them why respecting real athletes matters." Antonio put the rag down carefully, his expression neutral. He placed the bucket on the ground and stood upright. Even that simple movement carried an unexpected weight, his posture fluid and balanced, his breathing steady. Around the gym, conversations stopped. The women stopped fidgeting with their phones and turned their attention fully to the exchange. Something was happening. "All right," Antonio said finally, his voice low but even, like a deep drumbeat beneath calm waters. "But when we're done, you're going to apologize to them, to everyone here, for turning this place into a circus." Blake scoffed and shook his head. "Apologize? Man, you'll be apologizing to the floor once I'm done showing you where you belong." He didn't know it yet, but Blake had just woken something Antonio had sworn to keep buried forever. Once, long ago, Antonio Silva had been known by another name, Antonio Demolador Silva, 3-time world kickboxing and MMA champion, a relentless force feared across continents. He had retired at the peak of his career after a tragic accident in training claimed the life of his best friend and sparring partner, Ricardo Torres. That night, Antonio vowed never to fight again, never to unleash the side of himself capable of so much destruction. But dignity, he realized now, Sometimes demands old promises be broken. Blake stepped back toward the center of the mat, clapping his hands loudly. Ladies, gather around. You're about to see a real-life demonstration of why there's a hierarchy in this world. His clients hesitated, some clearly uncomfortable, but social obligations kept them close. They formed a half-circle, watching the quiet janitor walk calmly onto the mat. Jennifer Walsh, the wife of the city's top luxury car dealer, whispered something to the woman next to her. Her friend shook her head, uneasy. Blake caught it and smirked. "Don't worry, Jennifer," he called out loudly, ensuring everyone heard. "You'll learn more in the next 5 minutes than in 6 months of training." Jennifer lowered her gaze, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Antonio noticed. He also noticed the tension around her mouth, the discomfort in her eyes. Blake liked using people's names loudly, a subtle, practiced dominance tactic. Antonio knew that game well. "Look, everyone," Blake announced, gesturing at Antonio with exaggerated flair. "Here we have a perfect example of someone who never understood that there are appropriate places for certain people. Elite gyms are broken bar well, you know." The words hung in the air like smoke. Some of the women shifted uncomfortably. Antonio inhaled slowly, letting the insult wash over him like cold water. He'd heard it all before. He'd learned long ago that anger was a weapon best used sparingly and only when it mattered. Jennifer spoke up softly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Maybe we should continue our regular training," she suggested timidly. "It's getting late, Blake." Blake turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Jennifer Walsh, are you questioning my teaching methodology?" She blinked, startled by the use of her full name again, and quickly shook her head. "Sit down and watch," Blake commanded, his tone like iron. "You'll learn more from this than from any regular training." Antonio's gaze lingered on Jennifer for a moment. He recognized the look in her eyes, the fear, the shame of being made small in front of others. He'd seen it too many times, in too many rings, from too many fighters broken by words before a single punch was thrown. Ricardo's face flashed in his memory. The laughter of a crowd, the sting of cruel chants, and then the sickening thud of Ricardo's head hitting the mat. Antonio blinked the memory away. "Not here, not now." "Come on, janitor," Blake sneered, stepping closer again. "Show my students how to defend against a basic strike. Or is that too complicated for someone who only knows how to push a mop?" Laughter rippled through the room, thin and uneasy. Antonio remained motionless, calm, breathing slowly, evenly. Blake's jaw tightened. "What's the matter? Scared? Or are you going to stand there all night like a lamp post?" Then Blake made his first mistake. He shoved Antonio lightly on the shoulder, playful enough to appear harmless, but laced with condescension and arrogance. Antonio didn't budge, not even an inch. It was as if Blake had pushed a steel column rooted deep into the earth. A few of the women gasped softly. Blake's smile faltered. Just a flicker, but it was there. "Interesting," Antonio murmured under his breath. His first real words since agreeing to the challenge. Something about the tone, a low, steady, unhurried sent a ripple of unease through the room. It wasn't anger. It wasn't threat. It was something colder. The calm before the storm. Blake laughed awkwardly, trying to regain control. "Did you hear that, ladies? The janitor thinks this is interesting." But something deep inside Blake, something primal, had already registered the shift in energy. The balance of power in the room was no longer his. The 5 women exchanged uneasy glances, their laughter fading. Jennifer Chin, a 22-year-old purple belt in jiu-jitsu and graduate student in sports psychology, had been watching quietly from the back. For 2 years, she had been documenting instances of discrimination in sports for her thesis. She hadn't planned on witnessing one tonight, but now, she couldn't ignore it. "Sensei Blake," she said firmly, stepping forward. "Can I ask you something?" Blake turned, clearly annoyed. "What is it, Jennifer?" "Why do you think humiliating someone who's just doing their job is necessary for teaching your students?" The gym went silent. Blake blinked, caught off guard. He recovered quickly, though, forcing a laugh. "Excuse me, Jennifer, I'm teaching respect. Respect for real athletes and the discipline it takes to train at this level." "Respect?" she countered calmly. "Respect doesn't involve public humiliation, and it definitely doesn't involve racial undertones disguised as a teaching method." The silence deepened. Some of the women shifted uncomfortably. A few avoided looking at Blake. Antonio's jaw tightened slightly, his eyes softening as he looked at Jennifer. Her defiance reminded him of Keshaw, his younger sister, the one who used to stand up to bullies twice her size back in their neighborhood. The one who died at 17 from a stray bullet, thousands of miles away while Antonio fought for titles under blinding lights in Japan. Another ghost. Another weight he carried quietly. Blake's face darkened. "Jennifer, if you don't like my teaching methods, maybe you should find another gym." Jennifer stood tall, unflinching. "My tuition's paid, Blake, and I believe everyone here deserves an environment built on mutual respect, not humiliation." For the first time, Antonio smiled. It wasn't mockery. It wasn't submission. It was the slow, knowing smile of someone who had just been reminded of who he really was. Blake stood there, fists clenched at his sides, his breath heavy and uneven. His gaze locked on Antonio, who was now seated on the bench, wiping the sweat from his forehead. The silence between them was almost suffocating, thick with unspoken words, frustration, and pride battling inside both men. Jennifer, standing a few steps behind, looked between them with worried eyes. She could sense the storm brewing, and yet, there was also something else, something electric in the air. Every person in the gym had stopped what they were doing. Dumbbells hung midair, and even the clanging of plates had gone silent. All eyes were on them. Blake finally broke the silence, his voice low but laced with challenge. "Not bad," he said, his tone calm but sharp as a blade. "But that's just warm-up weight for me." Antonio slowly looked up, his expression unreadable. He placed the towel on his lap, leaned forward, and locked eyes with Blake. A small, confident smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Then maybe," Antonio said in a voice smooth and steady, "you should prove it." Jennifer's breath caught. The crowd around them murmured, already sensing what was coming. One of the gym trainers whispered under his breath, "This is about to get serious." Without another word, Blake stepped forward, grabbed a heavier barbell from the rack, and loaded it with plates. The sound of the metal sliding onto the bar echoed through the gym like a warning bell. Antonio rose from the bench, his shoulders squared, his massive frame casting a shadow over the polished floor. There were two titans in a silent battlefield, their pride the weapon, and strength the ammunition. Jennifer instinctively moved closer, her voice soft but tense. "Blake, you don't have to do this," she said, her hand lightly brushing his arm. But Blake didn't look at her. His entire focus was locked on Antonio. "I want to do this," Blake said, his voice firm, unwavering. Antonio watched Blake load the bar, his breathing controlled, his demeanor calm, but inside, he could feel his own heart hammering. He wasn't just lifting weights anymore. He was lifting his reputation, his pride, his very identity as the strongest man in this gym. Finally, the barbell was ready. Blake positioned himself, his hands gripping the steel with white-knuckled force. He lowered into his stance, his muscles tightening like coiled steel cables, and then he lifted. The bar rose slowly, his veins bulging, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with focus. The weight was crushing, but Blake powered through, forcing the bar to his chest before locking it overhead with a roar that shook the gym walls. The crowd erupted in gasps and applause. Even Jennifer's hands flew to her mouth, her wide eyes reflecting a mix of fear and admiration. Blake dropped the bar with a loud clang, his chest heaving as he turned toward Antonio. Sweat dripped down his temple, but his smirk said everything. "Top that." Antonio stepped forward, his footsteps slow, deliberate, commanding attention without a single word. He approached the barbell, adding 2 more plates on each side without hesitation. The crowd fell silent again. Even Jennifer's breath caught in her throat, her fingers gripping the edge of a nearby bench. Antonio lowered himself over the bar, inhaled deeply, and with one explosive motion, he ripped the bar from the ground. The sheer force of his lift sent a ripple through his body, every muscle flexing under the strain, his forearms shaking violently, but his focus unbreakable. "Come on, Antonio!" someone yelled from the back, their voice lost in the roar of blood rushing in everyone's ears. The weight crept upward, inch by inch, until Antonio locked it overhead, his face fierce, his jaw set, his body a perfect sculpture of raw strength and determination. The bar trembled in his grip, but he held it, unyielding. Then, with a deep grunt, he dropped it to the floor. The sound of metal hitting rubber thundered through the gym like an earthquake. For a moment, there was absolute silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the room exploded into cheers. Jennifer stared at Antonio, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. It was Blake, however, who stepped forward first. His jaw tightened, his eyes burning, but instead of anger, there was something else there, a respect. He extended his hand. Antonio hesitated for just a moment before gripping it firmly. The tension in the room shifted instantly, transforming from rivalry into something else, an unspoken acknowledgement between two warriors who had just tested each other to their limits. Jennifer finally stepped forward, placing a hand on Blake's arm and another on Antonio's shoulder, smiling softly. "You two are insane," she whispered, shaking her head. But that a broken bar was incredible. Blake smirked, his breathing still heavy. "Guess we're not so different after all," he said, glancing at Antonio. Antonio's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Difference is," he said, his voice deep and steady, "I don't quit." The crowd began to disperse, but the moment hung in the air, unshaken and unforgettable. Blake turned to Jennifer, his expression softening just slightly, though his pride remained intact. Antonio, meanwhile, grabbed his towel and water bottle, his calm composure returning as if nothing had happened. But everyone in that gym knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 3 days later, the gym was quieter than usual, but the tension was anything but. News of the showdown between Blake and Antonio had spread like wildfire. Videos were circulating online, gym members were whispering, and everyone wanted to know one thing: who was truly the strongest? Antonio was on the bench, sweat dripping down his chiseled arms as he racked the barbell after another brutal set. His focus was sharp, but his thoughts were heavier than the weights in his hands. He wasn't just training his body, he was preparing for something bigger. Jennifer walked in, earbuds in, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. She scanned the room and instantly spotted Antonio, but before she could approach him, a deep voice came from behind her. "Still working on catching up." It was Blake. He leaned against the dumbbell rack, arms crossed, his athletic frame casting a long shadow across the rubber floor. He was wearing a sleeveless hoodie, his muscles taut and defined, his expression cool but his eyes burning with silent fire. Jennifer sighed softly, already sensing trouble. "Blakey, a broken bar, not again. Haven't you had enough?" But Blake didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on Antonio. "I'm not here for her," he said flatly. "I'm here for him." Antonio calmly stood, wiping his hands on a towel, his face unreadable. "You want round two?" he asked, his voice deep, steady, and calm. Blake stepped forward, his sneakers thudding against the floor with each deliberate step. "No cameras, no crowd. Just you and me," he said, lowering his voice. "Let's settle this once and for all." Jennifer's eyes widened. "Are you insane? After what happened last time, someone's going to get hurt." Antonio smirked faintly, throwing the towel over his shoulder. "Then you might want to step back," he said, his tone laced with confidence. The tension between them was like static in the air, invisible but electric. Even the other gym members had started to notice whispers spreading across the room. Some were already pulling out their phones, sensing another explosive clash. Jennifer grabbed Antonio's arm, her voice sharp but pleading. "Don't do this. You don't have to prove anything to him." Antonio finally turned to her, his expression softening just slightly. "This isn't about proving anything," he said quietly. "It's about respect." Blake smirked, shaking his head. Respect. You're standing in my house, Antonio. This gym ain't my rules. Antonio stepped closer, his massive frame towering over Blake, their chests nearly touching now. Then let's see if your rules can handle reality, he growled softly. The showdown begins. They moved to the deadlift platform in the corner, away from most of the crowd, but whispers followed them like shadows. Jennifer stood frozen, torn between stepping in or letting it happen. She knew both men are stubborn, proud, relentless, and she also knew neither would back down now. Blake loaded the barbell first. The plates clanged loudly, the sound echoing through the silent gym. He chalked his hands, rolled his shoulders, and set his stance. His breathing deepened, each inhale sharp, each exhale controlled. With one explosive motion, he ripped the weight off the floor, his muscles straining under the pressure, veins bulging like steel cords. Slam! The bar hit the platform, rattling the ground beneath everyone's feet. Blake stepped back, his chest heaving, his glare locked on Antonio. Antonio didn't say a word. He stepped forward, cool and composed, adding 2 more plates on each side without hesitation. The crowd gasped softly. Jennifer covered her mouth, shaking her head. Antonio crouched low, gripping the bar. His knuckles turned white, his jaw clenched, his entire body coiled like a predator ready to strike. Then he pulled. The weight rose, steady and controlled, his muscles flexing under perfect form. His face remained calm, focused, unshaken. When he locked out the lift, he held it at the top for a full 3 seconds before letting it crash to the ground. Boom! The sound reverberated through the gym. The silence afterward was deafening. Blake's jaw tightened, his pride wounded but not broken. He stepped forward again, this time stacking even more weight. Antonio didn't stop him. He just waited. The two of them went back and forth, heavier, harder, faster, until the bar bent under the sheer load. Sweat poured, breath burned, and muscles trembled. By the 10th set, their bodies were at the brink, but neither man surrendered. Jennifer's voice finally cut through the chaos. "Stop it, both of you!" she shouted, stepping between them. Her sudden outburst froze them both in place. Blake's chest rose and fell rapidly. His fists clenched, his teeth gritted. Antonio's breathing was heavy, his brow furrowed. Neither wanted to admit it, but Jennifer's trembling voice carried more weight than any barbell in the gym. "This isn't strength," she said, her voice cracking. "This is ego, and one of you is going to get seriously hurt." For a moment, neither man moved. The entire gym waited for someone to break the silence. Finally, Antonio stepped back, grabbing his towel. "Not today," he muttered, his tone calm but sharp, his eyes never leaving Blake's. Blake glared, his jaw tightening, but he didn't push further. "Fine," he said coldly. "But this isn't over." As Antonio walked out, Jennifer stared after him, her heart racing. She turned to Blake, but he was already walking away, fists still clenched, his pride demanding more than his body could give. What none of them knew, broken bar, was that this rivalry had only just begun.